Hello, peeps. Welcome back to another episode. So, I promised you we'd be doing some deep diving into different qualities, characteristics of moms, toxic moms. This one is really close to my heart and the kind of the things that I went through with my mom the most, which is, are you the mother of your mother? Hello, it's me. This one, oh my gosh, when I read this in Susan Forward's book, Mothers Who Can't Love, I could not get to that chapter fast enough because I was like, yes, this is exactly what I had to do. I hated it so much. And it just is such a heavy burden. So, did you have to be the adult in your family? Yes, and yes, from the time of 8 years old, like ridiculous. Were you raising siblings and your mother because she wasn't in the right frame of mind to care for you? Yes. This was my story, and this episode is going to be juicy. I resonated with this type of mom because my mom literally just gave up when the going got tough. I think it's important to talk about those of us who had to mother our mothers because we're a specific breed. Although I think that happens a lot with probably single moms, maybe. I'm sure that there's some of you that's been the case too, even if your parents are married. But I feel like single moms get really fearful and then they put on the role. Like, you hear all the time with sons, it's like, oh, you're the man of the family now. It's like, no, they're not. They're babies. They're little boys. Like, don't put that label on them. But this is what would happen is like, well, now you have to be the responsible one. And I know that role came on my brother. When he was young, my mom would depend on him to be the man of the family. And I'm like, he's not a man, he's a boy, and he's a confused boy. So that created a ton of situations that were not good. It also leaves you in a place where you're not allowed to be a child, which is so unhealthy. I remember when my girls were younger and they were playing with their toys, their Barbies and their dolls, and they were having tea parties. And I just got down and played with them like I was the same age with so much joy because it was few and far between the times that I got to do that. And never really, my mom didn't play. My mom was not like super affectionate in that way. And so if I played, it was by myself. And so to be able to sit on the ground and play with my girls, it was like I was the 6-year-old with them. Just let's play Barbies, let's have a tea party, let's, play makeup, do all the things. And it made me realize at that moment, like, wow, I never got to do this with my mom. And that's really sad. Like, that's not okay. So it kind of made me sad. At the same time, I was so joyful to be able to experience those things with my girls. It made me sad thinking that my mom didn't really want to spend that kind of time with me. So let's figure out what is behind the behavior of a mom who chooses to check out of her own adult life and let the kids take over as a parent. So it's no secret to you guys that I've talked about this before, how I always took care of my mom after she had been beaten by men. I was the one that was bandaging her up and, fixing all the things that was all the scars, all the cuts, bruises, the sprains. I was finding all the things to help her get back on her feet, which was not something a child should have to do. And I did it well into my 20s. Like, she just kept getting in these situations where she would call me and I would run to her and stitch her up because she didn't want to go to the hospital. And so I'm real good with butterfly band-aids. She was also depressed a lot of the times when she was at home. So she was a single mom and she had to work, but she lost a lot of jobs too because she was very volatile, like very outspoken, probably on the side of like not good. She was obnoxious. And that was like her controlling way. Like, it was just like everyone's doing things wrong. She was right. Like, she just didn't get along with anybody really, except for her bar friends, because everyone's happy when they're drinking, and then they can all talk about how they're so great and everyone else is wrong, but yet their lives are not working well. So no one correlated that. But they were having fun pretending that they were the good ones. So when she was home, what I noticed is she was very anxious and or depressed. There was no in between. So there were also many times when she would go out, she would get super anxious. I got to go. I got to go. I have to go to the bars. Like that was her thing. I have to. Like it was some toxic medicine, you know, some kind of something that she needed to do that was going to help her live. Got to go to the bars or I'm just going to die. And she would come home many times with like friends, male friends, friends. We had school the next morning and she was partying in the next room. We lived in a converted garage. It was like a little 2-bedroom with a kitchen and a bathroom. It was very small. So she'd be in the next room partying with these people. I could hear her. Thankfully, my sister slept through it. And then I knew I would have to, this is where the mothering comes in. I would have to get up the next morning before my sister got up, pick up all the cigarette butts, ashtrays, like the glasses with the drinks, clothes that could be strewn all over because they would just throw their clothes off and go in her room and go to sleep, whatever. Throw all the clothes in there, shut the door, get up and get my sister ready for school. Which, by the way, my sister doesn't remember any of this. She read my book. She goes, I don't remember half of those things that happened. And I was like, of course you don't. You were young and there's huge trauma associated with a lot of that stuff. And so I think, her mind was protecting her. And she's like, man, I remember some of it. And I go, well, I covered a lot of things up because I didn't want you to feel unsafe, which, by the way, was not my responsibility to do. And my sister got hurt anyway in other ways that I couldn't protect her. So just a little side note for you. If you think you're doing something good, I know in your heart you're trying to do the best you can by protecting and covering everything up and mothering your mom and all that stuff. I'm telling you right now, it's not going to make a difference because things still happen, people still get hurt, and it's not your responsibility to hold the life or the lifestyle of your mom. Like that's her responsibility. And if she falls, she falls. Like let the chips fall where they may. I feel like if I could have gone back and done things differently, could I have? Maybe, but also I was still a child too. Like even as a teen, like I can't live on my own. I can't walk away. There are things like as a child you have to go through because you can't just leave. And if you get put in another person's house, is that going to be better or worse? Like I've heard horror stories of foster parents that aren't good. And then I know some people that are foster parents that are wonderful parents. So it's a crapshoot. So of course you're going to protect what you know. And I think the only thing I can tell you is don't take the weight of the responsibility of where that falls at the end of the day. Like that's not yours to hold. It's not up to you whether she's successful or not successful. That's up to her. And the only thing you can do is survive through that, get out, get some help for yourself and do better and know that like you don't have to be the one that saves everybody or mothers everyone. It was kind of unsaid that I was supposed to take care of her and take care of all the things and not talk about it. That was the other thing. If I talked about it, that made it untrue and I'm a liar. That didn't happen. You didn't clean up after me. Everything's fine. You're over exaggerating. So it was that gaslighting kind of thing. I remember one time that, well, there's a whole story in my book, but there was one time she brought a man home that by the grace of God, and I'm absolutely telling you by the, people say they don't believe in God. I heard his voice. This guy came in my room and started rubbing my shoulders and saying, hey, I'm going to go outside and get some matches for my cigarettes. Okay, why can't you just leave? Like you don't live here. You don't need to spend the night. He said, don't lock the door. That rang in my ear. I heard God say, lock the door. Okay, where'd that come from? He walked outside. I was like a ninja. I crawled to the front because I was in the back part by our bedroom and there was a long hallway. I crawled, like ninja crawled to that door and locked that door. I think I've told this story before. This is the 70s. All the windows in our house were usually open. We usually didn't lock any doors. Like it was the 70s. Like sometimes, yes, we locked them, sometimes no. There wasn't a lot of crime in our town. I locked that door and I locked the screen part. He came back and he's pounding on that door. He's mad. And long story short, like I'm crying like crazy. I'm shaking my mom with all my might. She is either drugged out, like this guy gave her something that she passed out, or she's never been that drunk where like I was shaking her with all my might. I don't know what happened that night. She did not wake up. She was moaning, but she didn't wake up. And he walked through the windows and tried the windows, and all the windows were locked. I was like, Jesus, Lord, thank you. And I ended up staying up all night watching guard because I was traumatized and petrified this guy was going to come back and hurt my family. My biggest thing wasn't for me. My biggest thing was, you're not touching my sister. She was like 8 years old, 10 years old, around there, very young. I just, I'm a fighter. Like, I'll fight you to the death. But like my sister, no, you can't have my sister. So the next morning, I wake up. I'm so mad. I fell asleep on the couch. My mom gets up and I'm like, do you know what happened last night? And I go to tell her and she denies the whole thing and tells me that I'm making it up. That didn't happen. Like just complete gaslighting because she couldn't see the reality of what she was doing to this family and the danger she was putting us in. I got so mad. I was a very calm child because my rage was inside. I picked up a casserole bowl and I threw it at the sink and it broke in a million pieces and I was shaking. I was so mad that she did not believe me. And she was like, something's wrong with you. I'm going to call 911. You're flipping out. And it was like, no, I'm tired of mothering you. That's what it was. And so she had me sit down. She was petrified that I was going to like strike out at her. Believe me, I wanted to. But I think that this is where it's like the crux in the road of knowing like, I can't take care of you anymore. I'm a child. Like this shouldn't be my responsibility. And so I think that, we get in these situations that are just, they're unsafe. Like our moms are not taking care of our welfare in the way that they should be. And we have to look at that and realize like, again, that was not something that I should have been holding. That was not something that should have been my responsibility. There shouldn't have been a strange man in my house after she goes and passes out in her room. That should not have happened. And he should never have been allowed to come in our room. This happens all the time with moms who are not being a mom and letting the kids mother themselves. So it's funny too, because here's what happens is when those kind of situations are going on, we don't even tell our good friends, except for maybe one. I had one best friend that kind of knew the whole story, but nobody at school really knew how bad it was. Even people I hung out with, even years later, they were like, oh, it wasn't that bad. And I'm like, you have no idea. I never told you anything. And they were just like, we don't understand. Like, that's what you were going through. And it's like, of course, but we're not going to spread our dirty laundry. And especially in that time, nobody talked about their feelings and, the truth and things like that. So I didn't want anyone to know, and I didn't dare share too much for fear that then they would tell everyone at school and then I would end up with no friends at all. So there's a fear base going on with that too. When you're mothering your mom and you know that there's all these dysfunctional things going on, you're told how responsible you are, and you may think that this is a compliment, and in some ways it can be, but it gives you satisfaction in the moment, and it's not healthy in the long run. So, what happens when you grow up and you don't want to be responsible for your parent? And what do they do? What do you do when they've relied on you so much? And now you're leaving, like you're growing up, you got to leave. And I will tell you, this happened to me when I was 16 going on 17. My dad said, come and live with me. I know it's crazy at the house. I think now I can take care of you. He goes, I don't know what to do with a girl, but I really want you to come and stay with me. My brother had moved there long ago, and I had done enough of rescuing my mother. And so I was ready to go. I didn't want to take care of my baby sister anymore. I loved her to death, but I was like, I want to be a kid. I wanted out. The problem came is that when it was time to go, instead of her saying, what can I do differently? Or I'm going to miss you so much. I love you. She came across with, you're so selfish. How can you dare leave us? What am I supposed to do with your sister? You're not going to be here to take care of her. How selfish can you be? Like it was my responsibility. She's my sister. She's not my daughter. That's not my responsibility, but that was put on me. Huge guilt. I felt awful, and I told my mom, "You have to take care of her. Don't leave her alone." My mom would go to the bars all the time. Perfect, cuz I was home. I could take care of my sister. I could feed her dinner. Now my sister's like 10 years old, and I'm leaving, and I had to. It was time. I was going to leave anyway at 18. I was 1 year off from that. She was so upset with my decision. She had no regards for my feelings or why I was doing that. Why did I want to go live with my dad? Because you're not paying attention to me. You just want me to be here as your babysitter and as your mother to tell you what to do and pick up after you. It wasn't because she loved me and was going to miss me. That's a hard pill to swallow. What ended up happening was I told her, do not leave my sister alone because she's afraid of the dark. And that's exactly what happened. Less than, I think, a year later, the neighbors called me and said, we can hear your sister crying. Can you come and get her? I didn't have a car. We only had one car in our family at the time, and my dad had gone somewhere. And I said, I don't have a car. I lived in the next town. I didn't even live in town. Otherwise, I would have ran over there. And I said, I can't. And so, long story short, my sister got taken away from my mom by her father. We have different dads. And her dad came and got her and took my mom to court and got custody. And my mom gave up. My mom became homeless after that because she didn't know how to take care of herself, and no one was saving her anymore. And now all her kids were gone. And what is my life about? I don't even know. And so that was really a hard pill to swallow because, again, the guilt of like, did I start that ball in motion? Was that my fault that my sister got taken away because I left? And now my sister didn't have someone to watch her. And now she's with a family that she doesn't really know. She didn't spend a lot of time with her dad until then. It was awful. The guilt from that took years for me to forgive myself because I felt like I had done something horribly wrong. And then I realized over time and therapy that there were things that my mom threw at me that had nothing to do with me, should never have been on my plate of responsibilities. And this is what happens when you mother a mother, is that their problems become your problems. And that's not okay. That you grew up as an adult in the family. You are responsible for your mother's problems to make her feel better. There's no room for your own feelings. Hers are more important. You need to lie for her. It's necessary, and she has drilled this into your head for years. You have to defend her if someone says something derogatory about her. I did this a lot. I could say bad things about my mom, but you can't say bad things about my mom. I would defend her to the hilt. Keep her secrets, even from your good friends. As an adult yourself, you can become a people pleaser and tend to be drawn toward enabling others. This is really bad because if you pick someone who has any kind of an addiction quality, you're going to think you can save them, and you can't. No more than you did save your mom. We pick the wrong boyfriends. Hello, did that so many times. The ones we think have potential, but need to be saved by us. Yes. The reality is that they're not good for us, and they won't change unless they want to, unless they do it themselves. A lot of you are perfectionists, and at all costs, things have to be perfect in your eyes, and it's your fault if it doesn't go well. And here's one that I am. You have an underlying anger because we do so much for everyone else, and we feel ignored a lot of the times. This was something I dealt with for many years, and it wasn't wrong. There was a lot of times I jumped in, fixed everything, did all this stuff, and then it was like my birthday would come around and nobody would say anything, and I'm like, after all the things I did for you. And I would just have this underlying rage of like, nobody cares. Like, I care so much and so deeply, and no one cares. And so the wall would come up, and I'm like, I just don't even want to be friends with anybody anymore. I just don't want to have a relationship with anyone anymore. And that's not really healthy either. And so, diving into that a little bit of like, well, why do you feel the need to like go above and beyond? So I do just what I want to do. I don't do too much extra anymore because I'm like, listen, my capacity is this big. Also, I'm older. So I'm like, that need to please it's not a big thing for me anymore. And so what do you do with all of these things? You got to recognize that you're only responsible for yourself. Your mom will survive or fail with or without you. I chose to help my mom when she started getting sick and she needed surgery because I felt called to do that. Let me tell you, on my own accord, I would have been like my siblings and said, I'm out. She's difficult. She's toxic. I can't do it anymore. God put something in my heart that was like, you can do this. And also, I'm going to teach you how to do this well. So I set up huge boundary lines with my mother. You guys know this. I've talked about this before. I took care of her, but there was just, my family was my family, and she was not allowed in it to destroy or disrupt. I didn't always do this well, and I wished that I had had a book like Susan Forward's back then so I could just read and study more. But I did have other people around me through my church and stuff that would talk. I would sometimes like talk about some of these things that I was struggling with. And a lot of them had mom issues, and some of them, their moms had passed. And they were like, listen, Phylis, you can only do what you can do. Your family is really important. And that's where you need to serve. And made so much sense and really helped. So I'm super grateful for my old church family pouring into me that way. This is going to be an individualized case by case choice that you're going to have to make. I will tell you, by all means, do not let her come into your family and destroy what you're trying to build. Like I've said before, don't let a toxic mom or relative come into your property line and bring chaos where you don't want it anymore. You're doing something new, and God's going to honor this with love. In this book, one of the women had a mom who was alcoholic and had no plans to change, even after the daughter asked her to. And the daughter was now the mother of a newborn baby. She had to let her mom go and keep her away from the home so she couldn't drink in front of her baby and the family and relatives and things. Her mom would not stop excessively drinking. Just didn't matter. She'd come in and drink in her home at any social occasion and just disrupt the whole family. And it was really upsetting to this woman. You have to know that they are responsible for their own selves. It's hard, but you're creating a new healthy family. And that is more important. So remember that this can be done. I have done it, and it works. So stay strong, you guys. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And until next time, I will see you later, peeps. Bye.